θα παρακαλέσω την κυρία Ελένη Θανοπούλου, την αγαπητή καθηγήτρια του Πανεπιστημίου Αιγαίου και αναπληρώτρια πρίτανη ακαδημαϊκών υποθέσεων και διασφάλισης ποιότητας του Πανεπιστημίου Αιγαίου και καθηγήτρια στη λειτουργική διοίκηση ναυτιλιακών επιχειρήσεων στο ναυτιλιακό τμήμα.
We're out of time, George.
Και, εν πάση περιπτώσει, μια αξιόλογη ιδιότητα που έχει η κυρία Θανοπούλου είναι ότι είναι πολύ καλή μου φίλη.
Right. For the sake of the few people here who are using their headphones, I will also speak in English if the rest of the audience does not mind. For me today is also not a regular speech I give. It's an anniversary. It's been 10 years since the time I stood in this very same auditorium, speaking from this podium, after about some hours that we learned the news that the Lehman Brothers had collapsed. I had to rewrite my speech on the back of the papers I was carrying with me on a boat that does not exist anymore, of a shipping company that does not exist anymore. And I remember I finished with the words that no matter what, the times ahead are going to be very interesting. The only thing you can be sure about is that our vessels and our people are going to keep feeding and fueling the world economy. We did all that all these 10 years, but there is a lot that has happened. And we are now in a very different place. I must say thank you to Ted Petropoulos, Emilios Avouleas, and Mr. Gaitis, because they really set exactly the scenery for what I intend to talk about. I have just 10 minutes for 10 years, or that was the initial deal. There, my financier, there, Mr. Xiradakis, came in, and basically he told me that I had 5 minutes for 10 years. This is what bankers do, you know. They squeeze everything they can out of you. So I'll try and squeeze during this time exactly what I want to say.
Now you have another 8.5, though.
Okay, thank you. Generous. So let's see what I mean by bundling the risk that goes along this, I would call it supply chain of shipping, from ordering, financing, to shipbuilding, and then, if we don't want it to go worry, to good ship owning. That, of course, after 2008, that ominous year. So we are still been listening in the past few years, weeks, years perhaps, if you take into account 2013, about the famous recovery of the market and the upside. I still recall that I was the only person in another auditorium trying to talk people out of ordering ships in 2013. Many of these people are not in this room today because they don't own shipping companies anymore. It is so sweet to the ear to listen to what you would like to listen to. And nobody wants to listen to bad news, but that's a story that we know since we are born. So we have today more ships than in 2008. What has not happened is the clearing of the market from the real tonnage surplus that we had in the 1930s. The market was cleared, the total world tonnage was reduced. The same happened in the 1980s. We haven't seen this yet. Instead, we kept on having dramatic increases of the world tonnage post-2008, basically because of a backlog, and then, of course, because people were sweet-talked in 2013 to close another deal. And banks had not burned their fingers entirely, they had some spare, and they went into financing these deals, and then we had the shipyards which did it, and of course we know where some of the shipyards are now, and where some of the shipping lines. This morning we heard about some notorious cases of failure in that respect. So we have this still talk about market upsides, and we still have more ordering, but do we still order these vessels, taking into account the real demand scenarios that we may possibly be facing? Or are we converting oral wishful thinking into what I would call the champagne game? Some of you, maybe many of you, are familiar with that famous beer game, an MIT product of Jay Forrester. a famous academic, who basically showed by a very simple beer game, that is, retailer, a distributor, a wholesaler, a brewery, how things go awry among 4 pieces of the supply chain. One spike somewhere makes the whole system go AWOL at the end. And in our case, we are not talking about beers, you know. We're talking about champagne. And champagne is much more expensive than beer, and so are our losses. So let's take a look at what this world is turning into, and what is it that we're not taking into account. Had we taken into account what happened post-2008, we would have foreseen that there was a carnage to come in 2016 in the container market. Who would be buying the goods that would be filling these containers, that would be filling those ships, that were filling the order books of shipyards? Well, the demand by the average consumer. Where is the average consumer now, together with his middle class or her middle class? Very much down the drain. And this exactly pictures the strongest, perhaps, middle class in the world, the US one. And you can see what happened to the average consumer income. Where was this demand to come from? I don't know what were people thinking, because that was a long-term trend that we saw forming after 2008. And in this country, we know it all too well. So if we want to plan for the future supply, we must take into account the real demand. And this is a demand which comes from a consumer whose power has been weakened, comes from a dematerialized economy. Remember this picture you see over the internet, the desk that you had in the 1980s and the desk that you have now? There's probably a thin layer of a tablet there. And before that, there were huge piles of plastic, of steel, of cables, of everything that ships transport. Now, if you don't need them on your desk, why on earth or at sea should ships be transporting them? So this is our world on the one side, on the demand side, and on the other side, we still have an investor glut, because we don't only have the traditional shipping investors, we have the new investors in shipping. And I don't mean only by that the export banks of large nations, but I also talk about the sharp eye of the odd, not so odd, fund owner who thinks that shipping is a great place to actually invest in. So we have, as a result, a never-stopping to grow fleet, and I really wonder how on earth or at sea is demand going to meet supply? So it's time to listen a bit to the music and remember that if we don't like the news, it's not exactly the fault of the news. It is the fault of us not being able to adapt. If we are, maybe we are to be among the even fewer winners. At least I remember in this auditorium the people who took the weekend of the 13th to the 14th of September of the Lehman Brothers collapse seriously managed to still be today in this room, and that's something. So what are we supposed to be doing when building and financing ships in 2018 that we were not doing or should not be doing as in 2008? World GDP has not been fast growing anymore, and you remember about this broken link between the GDP and the world trade, which affects shipping demand. Remember that people are going to be out of work, which means out of substantial income more and more. We do this in shipping. We are planning a future of people-less shipping operations at sea. Work productivity is ever fast growing, of course. And if you look at the population to save you, remember that where there are big, growing middle classes, they usually buy at home. They will buy in China. I don't think they will import, something from elsewhere if they have everything they need. And the other middle classes, the ones that are not growing and they're going down, their income is going down as well. So there is no hope from that side. So maybe we are able to save our lives through that fourth industrial revolution. Maybe there will be a boost by the economy of the free time. And as you see in the picture next to that, in our dreams, probably the future, the immediate future, the one that we're planning investment for is a future of more inequality, less average consumer income, and slow GDP growth. In that case, what are you supposed to be doing? especially if you consider that that fourth industrial revolution is not a volume or distance one. We covered this in the first, the second, and the third industrial revolution. And this one may not be an industrial one at all. And when it's not at all, it doesn't produce volume or distance. So this should not only make us worry, it should perhaps make us change. So I come to that proposition about the champagne game and how we were to change it. So if the future is light and voluminous, let's face it in a different way. Usually you try and place an order with somebody who wants to give you finance urgently and somebody who wants an order from you urgently. We should do it, I think, in a very different way. So it is going to continue to be a free market for large cargo owners to kill upsides, and it's going to be free for owners to take as little money as it allows some of them to remain afloat. So what are we supposed to be doing? Let's take a look at this supply chain in a different way. When you have 50, 500, 5,000 airline passengers going broke, this is not going necessarily to break the airline. But if you have 5 big debtors, or if you have 5 big clients in the shipyards and they go broke, this is going to take your shipyard along. And we have seen the results in 2016. And then it might well be the end. So we must take a look at this ordering, financing, and shipbuilding chain in a different way, not trying to find the opportunity and just offload the risk and squeeze whatever we can from the other party, but try and assess the risk of the other party like if it was a risk of our own. This is very much away from what we are really today in. We are in a casino economy. There is not very much ethos, and Mr. Gaitis made it very clear about what can happen if things go bad. But it's very close to the ethos of shipping as we know it. And I would like to finish exactly with this, that we have been through a lot, and ethos might be one of the losers. So these 10 years did what centuries had not managed to. The last remains of a world honoring the shipping business as we know it have been replaced from what my dear friend and academic co-author Dr. Gratsos loves to point as the root of many ills. The casino economy, as the current reign of financial speculation, has been termed since the first signs of the current era decades ago. One US commentator on the casino economy has said that the term was extremely astute. There have been so many losers already, and that comment was made as early as 2003, 5 whole years before the crisis dawned on us, for many, as I said, precisely in this same auditorium. One boom, the greatest in shipping history. One bust, the greatest in shipping history. And many bitter lessons learned later. Let's hope that the shipping ethos is not one of the losers of the last 10 years. And let's hope and wish that through this casino economy we have to survive in anymore, the ways of our grandfathers who held their ships afloat, come hell and high water, the bravery of captains and crews who axed flaming pipes threatening their crews, brought food to starving areas amid storms and typhoons, fuel to frozen homes, axing ice from the deck amidst the North Atlantic in the night. With seamanship and determination, let's hope that through financial casino and political inferno, their ethos will prevail. It is up to us, their descendants. Thank you.